Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 2, Chapter 10 already, His Greatest Enemy. So last week, we see an odd situation befalling our hero, Lord Belmont, at a Tyrol family dinner in the fabulous Rustum Labyrinth. While the proceedings were in progress, things were interrupted by the infamous Pirate of Remnath, Lord Sedgwick of Cold, where he sicks his boys, he dirges them into rigidity, and sicks his henchmen on them to start relieving them of their valuables. And then everything gets weird, the sky turns odd, and then the woman in gray walks across the sky and arrives and then tells Lord Sedgwick, there's a boy about 9 or 10, I want him. And they start, as well as robbing them, looking for this kid to abduct for this lady in gray. Before that could happen, the dashing Mad Lord of Walther arrives and foils Lord Sedgwick of Cold's robbery attempt, disabling or killing many of his henchmen. And after that, Lady Jubilee once again is like, wow, there are forces conspiring against us, and they're after our children, specifically her son, and it's time to indoctrinate them into the ways of Tyrolese sorcery, woo. And she takes them down into the culverts beneath the manor, where she has a little work area set up where she has trained all of the other sisters ahead of them, and now it's their turn. And just to kick things off, as his sister Virginia was rather skeptical of this whole process, she summons a few black maidens, which are denizens of the plane of air, and those are how Mother manages to bring all his wayward sisters home. By using black maidens, they can pursue you using sight and smell, and when she sicks them on you, they're gonna relentlessly pursue until they zap you right back home. And then, to further demonstrate, she summons a creature from the cobwebbed lands, from the shadow realms, from hell, essentially a hideous soul devourer, and then says, you can have my son, and the soul devourer runs at Stenstrom ready to rip his soul out, and then she tells the black maiden that she'd summoned, save my son, and then the black maiden kisses him on the cheek, and poof, he disappears and reappears in his bedroom. That was just an appetizer, like a tuna fish sandwich to get you ready for what's coming up, as Mother teaches them the intricacies of Tyrolese sorcery. So that's what we're gonna tackle in this chapter. Their training, at least the tail end of the training, because it lasted a long time. And pay attention to the things that are unseen in the dark, for there is several characters, or at least one character that's introduced in here. It's not obvious, but it is, and it's a character that will manifest itself in time, and it is seen here. And it's not the first time it's been seen also, if you've been paying attention, which I sincerely hope you have. Anywho, let's proceed immediately. Part 2, Chapter 10, His Greatest Enemy. They sat in the stony darkness of the culvert. Stenstrom was wearing the now familiar white robes. His sisters, Virginia and Lyra, wore the same. Their training had been going on at a steady rate for 9 years, around the calendar, without protracted pause. He was now 19 years old. Their mother, sitting before them, wore black robes. As usual, Mother slowly smoked a large cigarette with a burning ember that sizzled with every pull. This old culvert, once flowing with drainage waters from the interior swamps of Esther, became like a second home. They sat in a semicircle in the quiet dark, with all manner of arcane flotsam from their years of study scattered around them. There were tripods full of boiling oils and gels heated with purple, red, and blue flames, mortar and pestles aromatic with the crushed remains of herbs and rare salts sat pushed aside, along with various scrolls and books opened to mystical pages. The books were thick, made of hide and stout vellum, each page meticulously hand-copied from Mother's originals. Over the past 9 years, they'd worked hard, writing down the knowledge Mother shared with them, and each student now had a small library of arcane learning written by their own hand. Lady Lyra's books were very studious and similar to Mother's. Stenstrom's were craftier with generous hand-drawn art, and Lady Virginia's were overflowing with expanded insets and detailed step-by-step instructions. Near Lady Jubilee was a hollow pedestal. The cheery image of Lord Stenstrom the Older slowly spun, something she always kept near her when he was away on his fleet vessel that she hated. Lady Jubilee was, as before, putting her life in jeopardy. She was teaching her children the shadowy and seldom spoken of subject of Tyrol sorcery, an offense not easily forgiven by the Sisterhood of Light should it become known. Lady Jubilee, as she often said, didn't care about the sisters and potential punishments that could be in the offing. Her children needed these skills, and they would have them. The repercussions to herself would be dealt with at another time. "Now, do it again," she said, her voice echoing around the vastness of the culvert. All heads turned to Virginia as she raised her hands. Virginia had inherited a body shape very similar to Mother's, and therefore was a tad plump in her robes. She shook her hands, and in a blur, 2 bright blue balls appeared between her fingers. Jubilee was elated and critical at the same time. "Decent technique, Virginia, but slow hand speed," she said, pointing with her cigarette, the ember making a reddish trail as she moved it about. "I could see how you did that, even in the dark here. You must practice with your dexterity. I have told you so before. Let me see one of your holy stones, please," she said. Virginia handed one of them to her. She looked at it in the dim light. "There are a number of imperfections in the plaster casing, and it's too thick in spots. It'll be difficult to break." She cast the holy stone away, where it bounced off a stone slab and didn't crack open. "I expect better next time. It should be hard enough for safe handling, yet thin enough to crack open with the slightest of tosses." Even in the dark, Stenstrom could see Virginia flushing up a bit. "Now, Virginia, come here and turn around." Virginia was shy and apprehensive. Mother, I'm not ready." "Come here, Virginia. By creation, you're as timid, as uncoordinated as your sister Deneba was years before." She slowly stood and approached her mother. "Turn around." Virginia winced and turned around. There was a small click, the sound made loud in the quiet culvert, as Virginia's wrists were bound with a stout set of manacles. "Now, get out of them, Virginia." As Virginia struggled, Mother turned her attention to Lyra. "Lyra has long completed her training. Watch her skill and technique." Lyra pushed back the sleeves of her white robes and displayed her hands. In a blur, she had 6 Tyrol marzible daggers nested between her fingers. Mother was clearly impressed. "Well done, Lyra." She reached out and took one of the daggers. "See? Impeccable balance. This is what you two have to do." She held it up by the tip and sent it tumbling into a solid rock face, where it buried to the hilt with a thud. "We often forget the Los Capricos weapons of my family, the Marzible, your father's nth pistol being a bit flashier. But do not forget your Tyrol heritage and the Marzible dagger that comes with it. Make it well and keep it hidden, and you will never run out of them. You will never be disarmed." Virginia cried out and fell over, her wrists still hopelessly shackled, her robe butt slightly sticking up in the air as she struggled. "I can't! Mother, I can't get out!" "You have much to train, young lady. Slow hands, thick fingers. You require improvement in every category of the art. Lyra, please save your sister." Lyra scooted over and reached out. Virginia disappeared. "Leave me alone," they heard her voice say. Mother looked around and pulled on her cigarette. "I will stand corrected, Virginia. You have mastered the art of walking in the shadows. Yes, you do that quite well." There was a clatter off in the distance. "Ow!" they heard her cry. "These damn things!" Mother laughed. "Virginia, come back here and Lyra will take them off." Virginia re-emerged a moment later, still hopelessly shackled. Lyra approached her and in an effortless movement had the manacles off. Jubilee took a pull from her cigarette. "We shall discuss this development in further detail later, young lady," she said to Virginia. "Now, Lyra, shackle your brother." Lyra smiled and approached. Stenstrom calmly turned and let her put them on. "Do not be kind to your brother, Lyra. Make them tight." Lyra squeezed and the manacles clicked tightly into place. She then resumed her seat. "You forgot something, Lyra," Stenstrom said. "What did I forget, Belle?" "These." Stenstrom held out the manacles and handed them back to her. She gasped at the speed and ease with which he'd escaped them. Jubilee sat there in silence, her cigarette glowing brightly. "Now, Belle, I wish to see your marzible." He shrugged and felt on the spot. "I'm not finished with it, Mother." She held out her hand and motioned with her fingers. He hesitated and then pulled the small dagger from the folds of his robe. It had a classic stiletto handle with a tapering blade, sharpened on both sides. He had stained the handle black and embossed tiny stars at regular intervals. Lady Jubilee carefully inspected the dagger, testing its weight, trying its balance. "Belle, I don't see anything wrong with this marzible. It looks completed to me. I'm very pleased." Jubilee smiled and gazed at him with a mother's pride. She handed it back to him where he returned it to the folds of his robes. "Now, turn it into many." He raised his hands. He shook them and 6 identical daggers appeared between his fingers. She approved with a nod, as did Lyra. Virginia stewed a bit. "And your holy stones? Let me see them." Stenstrom shook his hands and the daggers vanished, replaced by 4 shiny balls of pastel green. Mother took one and looked at the surface. It was like an enameled ping-pong ball. She hauled back and threw it. It smashed against a stone slab and burst into a confusion of spiderwebs. "Excellent, Belle. Well made." Jubilee looked over her shoulder. "Now, Belle, for your final test of the day, I wish you to get up and start walking." "Walking? Where, Mother?" he asked. Jubilee pointed into the darkness of the culvert beyond. "That way." Confused, Stenstrom stood, straightened his robes, and started walking. The stone floor of the culvert was strewn with old pebbles and other bits of wash once carried along by the swamp runoff, and he crunched with every step. The culvert was vast, stretching off into the dark for as far as his straining eyes could see. He had no idea how far he had walked when he barely heard his sister Lyra cry out, "Come back, Belle!" He turned and made his slow way back, seeing nothing at first. Then the low purple glow of the tripods came into view, along with the 3 huddled shapes of his mother and 2 sisters. When he returned, his mother looked up at him. "Do you know what your trouble is, Belle?" "No, Mother," he replied. "You're too compliant. I ask you to walk off in the dark, and you do so without question." Jubilee turned to his sister Lyra. "Lyra, get up and start walking." "Why would I want to do that, Mother?" Jubilee smiled. "You see, Belle, your sister didn't simply take a bizarre order, and nor should you. Are you afraid of me, my son?" "Mother, you have put me to the knife 3 times by my latest counting." "There is occasion for the knife, Belle, and there is time when you need to be a man. I have put you to the knife because I love you. I love my children beyond all reason. I have taught you my secrets, and I have made you strong, fully able to see to yourself. Now, with your skills fully matured, I do not have to worry about you quite so much. I would wager your skills against anybody's, gifted or not, blue or not. You're a good son, Belle, but I want you to stop being such a good son all of the time. I want you to resist my demands, confound me, challenge me. Look at your sisters before you. They challenge me, and yet they still sit at our family table. Though I am your mother, consider me your enemy. Consider me your greatest, most vile enemy. Henceforth I shall attempt to confound you, to set you to my will. I want you to resist, to confound me in turn. Thus, using your wits, I shall make you strong. Nothing more than your best effort do I expect of you. To give you the will to become your own man, that is the final bit of sorcery I have to teach, for you have mastered all else. Jubilee leaned back. So, Belle, I want you to get up and start walking. He sat there a moment and then got up again and started walking down the culvert. After a minute or two, he heard his mother's voice. Come back, Belle. This time, he kept on walking into the deep dark of the culvert. Belle! He heard from far away, but he didn't listen. He kept on going. After a time of wandering through the dark, he decided he'd gone far enough and turned to go back, but quickly found he was quite lost. He had no idea which way he'd come from. Mother? He cried. Mother? No answer. He spun around, not really sure what to do. He couldn't see a thing, and he had no holy stones on him that would make light. He heard a sound. It was a soft hiss, like the grating of small bits of dry rock rubbing together. It seemed to be coming from far away, but was rapidly approaching. He felt he was in terrible danger. He backed away. He felt something dry and abrasive wrap around his ankle, like a coiling snake made of sand or grit. He tried to free himself, but whatever it was had him tight. He heard something. He heard Belle in a sort of grating moan. His first inclination was to panic. However, he managed to recall his untested training. He shook his hand and created 3 marzible daggers. He quickly let 2 fly. He could hear the creature moving around his throws in a gritty, snake-like undulation. The marzibles bounced off the stone floor of the culvert with a clatter. He heard the unseen creature tittering slightly, as if it were toying with him. He lined up his 3rd dagger and let it fly. It hit something. Stenstrom was seized about the waist and held fast for a moment. It felt like the soft beach full of sand, and then it gave him a firm shove, sending him sprawling. He lost his footing and roughly fell to the ground. Something metallic clattered in front of him. His marzible returned to him by the creature, possibly. Bye-bye, it hissed. He heard something sliding away in a gritty fuss, and then it was gone. 3 globes of light approached. Belle! Came his mother's shaking voice, his sisters close by. Boy, Mother was mad, Lyra said, snickering. Stenstrom, Lyra, and Virginia sat at their favorite Marian ruin down the hillside. Virginia fumbled with her gown. She said to resist, so I resisted. I don't think she expected you to resist quite so quickly, Virginia said. She shook her hands and nothing happened. Why am I so bad at this? I don't understand. Keep your hands closer to your chest, Stenstrom said, trying to help her form. Virginia got frustrated and vanished into the shadows. Virginia, come back here, please, Stenstrom said. No! I'm terrible! Came her voice from nowhere. Get back here, Lyra said, annoyed. Virginia reappeared like nothing, still holding her hands in the same position. Thank you, Stenstrom said. So what are we to infer from this? Is Mother going to allow us a bit of roam from now on? Well, perhaps, but I doubt it, Lyra said, adjusting Virginia's foot placement. She might say she wants us to spread our wings, but I don't know if I believe her. I think she's going to sick the Black Maidens on us anytime she wants us home. She's done it before. She used them on me last month, Virginia said, readying her hands for another try. I was visiting the House of Copperwell when out of nowhere a Black Maiden appeared, kissed me on the cheek, and teleported me straight home. It was galling and a little embarrassing. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of being sequestered, Lyra said. I want to stretch out and see the cities and find a love on my own. Those black maidens shall make it impossible. She'll have us back here on a whim. Stenstrom reached into Virginia's gown. Don't put your marzible there. It's too difficult to extract. Here is better. He adjusted it. Thanks, Belle. He stepped back and leaned against the old weathered telescope. I know almost nothing of the cities or of the people in them. You two are my best friends. I have no others. Lyra approached him. And in that, Mother has done you a disservice. How are you to properly interact with your fellows if you've rarely been allowed to do so? Big world out there beyond these manor grounds. And I've seen almost nothing of it. Virginia lifted her hands to try again. Watch your hands, Lyra said. Now breathe and produce them. Lyra looked at Stenstrom. I'm afraid when you do get out, you're going to be horribly unprepared. I have no idea how to act and probably will get homesick. Well, I think you'll do just fine, Belle, Virginia said. She shook her hands. Again, nothing happened. Not on the upstroke, sis, on the downstroke. Try again, he said. You two and Mother make this look so easy, she said, flustered. Lyra began toying with the telescope and swung it around to look at a smaller moon, Solon, which was high to the south. I've been looking through these old Marian telescopes since I was a kid. I've never seen anything other than the ordinary. What? Virginia asked as she flexed her fingers and prepared herself. That funny star the Marians say is out there. I've never seen it. How do you hide a star? It cannot exist. The Marians have been deluding themselves, just like we have been. And how so? Virginia asked. That we'd ever get to live a life that we truly wanted, free of knives and black maidens, Lyra said. Virginia shook her hands and produced one knife between her fingers. Ah ha ha! She cried in triumph. Well, for one thing, Lyra, you're looking for the Marian star in the wrong place. What do you mean? You've got the telescope pointing to the south. The star is over there, she said, pointing with the dagger to the northwest. Stenstrom and Lyra looked at each other. Come again? Oh, that big funny star over there, the yellow one with the red clouds swirling around it. Plain as can be. Right over there, don't you see it? Stenstrom and Lyra looked to the northwest and saw nothing but the afternoon sky. You see a large yellow star over there? Stenstrom asked, shading his eyes, seeing nothing. Yes, Virginia replied. How is it you see a large yellow star to the northwest? Lyra asked. How is it you do not? She replied. She shook her hands, and the dagger vanished. And with that, we conclude Part 2, Chapter 10, His Greatest Enemy. So, we see basically the conclusion of a 9-year process where Mother trained Stenstrom and his two sisters, Virginia and Lyra, in the art of Tyrol sorcery. Lyra had a little pre-indoctrination to it, so she was a little bit ahead, but she's pretty much done. She's mastered all the skills. She's pretty proficient. Stenstrom also has mastered all the various techniques that are expected of him, and he and they all had created like a library of basically spell books, books of arcane and mysticism that they all hand copied from Mother's books. So he has his books, and he can do pretty much all the things that he does later on that we saw him doing at the beginning of the book, where he could shake his hands and make things appear, these daggers, these marzible daggers. And he, even though there's only one of them on him, you can create many marzibles if you know the proper technique. You're never disarmed with the marzible. Kind of a handy thing. You can throw it and lose it and just conjure up another one. It's sort of like an endless supply of these little daggers. He can also create holy stones using the various recipes his mother gave them to, and they do all sorts of things, as we saw earlier in the book. They can create webs, they can create light, they can create fire. They can do quite a bit. And he can also turn invisible, and we've seen him doing that. And his sister Virginia is probably the least proficient, although she's good at turning invisible. She's having trouble producing things from her hands, and towards the end of the chapter, his Stenstrom and Lyra were coaching her, and on her technique. But they started mentioning a star in the sky that the Marians, the Pilgrims of Marians, claim exists. A large yellow star with kind of a weird red cloud sort of swirling around it. That's the Star of Marian that they claim exists. Yet very few people can actually see this star. And Stenstrom and Lyra look, and they see nothing. However, Virginia, who's the worst at Tyrol sorcery, can see the star, and she points, it's over there. And usually, if you can see the star, many people who can become pilgrims of Marion, and we'll see the pilgrims of Marion later on in the story. Not in the first book here, and not in Sands of the Solar Empire, but in the second book. Well, actually, we do see them briefly in this book, but they're mostly in the next book, Against the Juries, where you see the pilgrims of Marion. If you're remembering some of the other readings where we've already seen Paymaster Stenstrom, we see Lady Alesta of Dare. She is a pilgrim of Marion, so she can see that star, and she can summon the star's road, the Marion's road. A lot of stuff floating around in the League and whatnot. Also, he had a creepy encounter with something in the dark, and that something will manifest itself again later on. Again, I don't really putter about. If it's in the story, it's there for a reason. There's no just casual sides that don't add up to anything. No, we don't play that. If it's in there, it's there for a reason. And so whatever that was, we will be seeing it again next week. The next chapter is a little too long to throw it in here, so we will get to it next week. Chapter 11, The Nth. So the Nth, if you recall, is the name of his pistols that was given to him by his father, the Nth pistols, and we will go over them in further detail next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.